Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar about saving the environment with the Wingtra and Project Seagrass. Really grateful for everybody to join us today, and hopefully it will be a great introduction into what Richard and his team are doing at Project Seagrass, and also Terence to go through the actual system itself. So I'm sure some of you have already seen the Wingtra, but we've got a great host today with myself from Coptrz. I'm James, if you don't know me, and I'm the business development manager at Coptrz and work primarily with surveying construction businesses to enable them to use drones to their full potential. We're obviously joined by Dr. Richard Lilly, who is the director of Project Seagrass, who's going to go through their really great project, which they're utilising the Wingtra and drone technology. And we're also joined by Terence, who is from Wingtra, who is going to go through some more of the project specification and some other use cases as well. So it's really great to be here. If you've got any questions at all, then please feel free to put it into the questions panel on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll do our best to answer them all we can, and yeah, just enjoy it. No holds barred. Ask anything. It's a really great opportunity to have your questions answered by the end user, which will be Richard, and also Terence from a manufacturer's point of view. So yeah, over to you, Richard.
Hi guys. So yeah, so I just thought I would start with a bit of an introduction to Project Seagrass. Project Seagrass is a marine NGO. We were founded seven years ago now, and essentially we work with an ecosystem which is called seagrass. And if you can imagine grass on land, it's pretty much exactly the same stuff, but it grows in the sea. But it's gaining increasing recognition, I guess, as a very important habitat. For a long time, it's been underappreciated, I guess, especially when you can compare it to the likes of coral reefs or mangrove ecosystems. But what we know now is that they're havens for biodiversity, seagrass meadows. They've got huge fisheries contribution, so lots of nursery fish grow up in seagrass meadows. They sequester huge amounts of carbon, so in terms of mitigating the effects of climate change, understanding the extent of what the seagrass meadows we have is super important. So yeah, charity was the NGO was set up 2013. 2015 we became a registered charity in England and Wales, and then we became a registered charity the following year in Scotland. And our work portfolio has kind of grown and grown. From the outset, it was really about communicating the importance of seagrass ecosystems. But over the past 7 years or so, we've begun to recognise that actually we don't know the full extent of our seagrass meadows here in the UK, and that there's a need for detailed mapping. And so that's where the Wingtra comes in. But just to give you a flavour of the kind of work we do in the UK, I've got a little video to show you now. And this kind of highlights the restoration of seagrass meadows that are taking place around our shores at the moment.
Seagrass is a hidden wonder, something everyone should know about. It's a fantastic life giver, a haven for wildlife, protects our coastline. It's an amazing climate mitigator. You can find seagrasses all around the UK, but these are only a sort of a fragment of what they used to be. Ultimately, we've lost probably over 90% of our seagrass, and unless action is taken, there's a real risk that this will actually disappear forever. This project is giving that little bit of hope back, that we can start to do things, that we can take action.
So Seagrass Ocean Rescue is a collaboration between Swansea University, WWF,
Project Seagrass and our funders, Sky Ocean Rescue. The aim of this project was to collect 1 million seagrass seeds and replant them in the biggest seagrass restoration project ever to happen in the UK.
A lot of our focus is on the land, and people don't realise the important role that ocean can play in helping with the climate crisis. We've lost 92% of seagrass across the UK, and there's been a number of different factors which have caused that. Some of these factors include pollution, boating, for example, anchor damage, and so consequently, yeah, the seagrass has been disappearing across the country.
We're finally here. We've collected a huge amount of seeds, and we're planting them with an amazing bunch of volunteers. We've been doing a lot of community engagement work around Dale, and particularly the local community who live there. So trying to work with the passionate people of Dale so that a restoration can happen in harmony. We took on a big ambition to collect 1 million seeds. We've been out with volunteers where some of them are actually snorkeling in the water, picking the seeds whilst they're floating on the surface in about 0.5 metre to 1 metre of water. A lot of the seagrass in the UK is actually it's much deeper, and the only way to access that seagrass is to use scuba divers. Over the last few months, we've had a huge team of people sort all that material and start to put that into a place where we can begin to separate the seeds, put those seeds into bags and begin to really prepare for the planting of these seeds. We've been also doing a whole series of other activities. One of those is to undertake a baseline assessment of the biodiversity that is present in Dale Bay, to look at the little invertebrate beasties living in that habitat. We were going into the unknown. There's difficulties along the way. It's been windy, we've had hail, we've had a lot of rain, but we've had an amazing, resilient bunch of people helping us. Over 2,000 people have taken part. It's inspiring to see all those thousands of people part of our project.
The volunteers on this planting week have just been amazing. They've been up at the crack of dawn with us. We've got teams up on land that are a huge production line of just adding little scoops of seeds and sand into these small bags that we've had tons of volunteers prepping beforehand. We've been into lots of different schools of all kind of backgrounds, using primary school kids to fill 20,000 sandbags, and the kids just go crazy for the sand, filling them up. And then they've been ferried down to the beach where we've got a load of people doing a good lot of heavy lifting to carry it out to the boat.
From our staff at Swansea University to members of the WWF team coming down to help, to students, to community members, all sorts of people coming to join and contribute to this major first seagrass restoration project in the UK. They walk away understanding that we need to restore our oceans, and it sort of inspires hope that there are people who want to change the state of our UK seas. So our project has been a huge success, but the missing component really has been the fundamental support from government, with actual fundamental change that recognises that our seas are in a terrible state. And if we're going to fight climate change, if we're going to fight problems of food security, then we need to restore our oceans, and that involves real government support.
We can all do something to help the ocean. We can reduce our use of plastics, we can buy more sustainable seafoods, as well as lobbying our local politicians as well to push them to take action to protect and restore our seas.
We'll be back here over the next few years monitoring the progress of our project. Putting near to 1 million seeds in Dale Bay is ultimately going to result in a lot of seagrass.
If I came back here in a couple of years and I went for a dive and going along and I see this huge meadow, that would be incredible, that would be amazing. Might be a few tears.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a flavour of the kind of work that we're looking to do, and really I wanted to take today as an opportunity to talk about how remote sensing fits into that picture. So our sort of mission within the UK, we work to conserve ecosystems, seagrass ecosystems globally. So that's both conservation and restoration. In the UK, you've seen the figure that up to 92% of our seagrass meadows have been lost. And so we're looking to restore those meadows that have been lost. Over the past 100 years, there's been a significant loss of seagrass meadows because of water quality. So if you can imagine during the Industrial Revolution and the growth of all our major cities, the water quality in the Thames, the Clyde, the Firth of Forth, the Humber hasn't been great. But a lot of work has been being done and is still being done in the UK to improve water quality. And so what that gives us is an opportunity to kickstart the recovery of some of these ecosystems. By planting a hectare or 2 hectares of seagrass, it's roughly equivalent to a football pitch or rugby pitch, depending what your sport is, of seagrass. That can actually change the environment enough to create a positive feedback loop where you get these expansions of these meadows. And like I said at the beginning, more seagrass equals more carbon being stored. It means more fish, more habitat for juvenile fish. It helps buffer acidity in the local environment, helps stabilise the shoreline, improving water clarity. Multiple benefits. So I guess there's the 2 strands to our work. There's the global work, and then there's also the work here in the UK, which is about restoration. Globally, one of the first times I heard about the Wingtra was with some colleagues who work out of Australia, and they used the Wingtra to map dugongs or to follow dugongs. So we're part of a global UN project at the moment, working in 5 countries in the Indo-Pacific, so Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, East Timor, and the Philippines. And the team over in Perth are using drones for following dugongs. Dugongs are essentially, if you're not sure, like manatees or sea cows, and the major component of their diet is seagrass meadows. So understanding the sort of movement patterns of these large marine mammals is important. And then domestically, what we're using remote sensing for is to try and establish where our seagrass meadows are and to monitor change over time. So if you think about the process you just saw in the video, one of the elements there is the actual collection of the seeds. And so to understand how many seeds can be collected from a given area, it's important to actually know the extent of that area rather than just we know that there's some seagrass in a bay. We do have the capacity, working with colleagues at the National Oceanography Centre and the German Aerospace Centre, to derive some satellite images, so Landsat and Sentinel images, but often the resolution there isn't at a level that we would need for establishing the sort of coverage of seagrass and how that changes over time. So that's when you turn to look at drones. When I first started using drones for mapping seagrass meadows, it was probably 6 years ago now, in the middle of my PhD, and I was simply using a small Phantom. It was just really for me a sort of conceptual trial of the methods to see if this is something that could work. And it did. I was working in Greece, so the water clarity was excellent, and you could map small areas of the bay. But the one limiting factor for me that was always an issue with the Phantom was you just couldn't cover the areas that you needed. And that's especially true in the UK, where if we're looking to map large areas of coasts, you need a drone which can stay airborne for a long period of time. And so we've recently had some support both from the Welsh Government and Marine Scotland to sort of upscale our work, because it's helping to meet national goals in terms of marine restoration and conservation. And so we've been fortunate actually to get these 2 Wingtra drones. And the benefit that the Wingtra is offering is one, its ability to stay airborne and cover such a large area on any given flight, and then 2, the payloads that can be inserted into the Wingtra. So having both the Sony camera, so provides obviously very high resolution images, and then also having the Microsense Alton sensor, so looking at a multispectral option is also enabling us to really pick out where seagrasses exist in the coastal zone compared to other habitat types. A lot of this work's also being pioneered not just here in the UK, but over in New Zealand. And so recent scientific papers of them using a Microsense on a traditional quadcopter, they're saying it's excellent and the concept works perfectly, but we just wish we had a fixed wing that could cover larger areas for us to assist with that mapping. So if I can just move on a slide. These are just a couple of photos of seagrass meadows from both Indonesia, I think in the top left here, and the bottom right is a meadow that we work out in North Wales. And I'm not too sure if you can see my screen here is a little bit grainy, but through that meadow there's transects, which are basically a 50-meter transect line laid out through the meadow. So I'm sure we've all been or did this at school, maybe counting daisies on a football pitch or something, where you lay out quadrats and you look at the percentage cover of various species within the quadrat. So part of the monitoring, part of the ground truthing of any habitat is actually being in the habitat and trying to establish some of those characteristics. But the benefit of being able to remotely sense the habitat, whether that be by satellite or whether that be by, in our case, Wingtra now, we're then able to combine that with the ground truth data to really provide for resource managers, whether it be Marine Scotland, Natural Resources Wales, Natural England, an understanding of both the habitat characteristics, but also then the distribution. And then from that, we can obviously infer what we call the ecosystem services, but the benefit those habitats provide for people. Next slide, please. The other benefit of having a drone, which can be, you can launch regularly. This is some of the work that I was conducting in Greece, and so this was a photo taken from a Phantom. But you can see in areas around our coast, which tends to be where seagrass meadows exist, they can often come into conflict with. Often seagrass meadows can be degraded by water users who perhaps don't even realise the fact that they are damaging these sensitive marine habitats. So if you can imagine dropping an anchor over the side of the boat and then dragging it through a meadow, you can actually cause quite a lot of damage to the meadow. And Greece, in Greece, for example, you can tell on the south side of a lot of the islands, the wind tends to come in the east, in the Aegean Sea, so eastern Greece. You tend to get this quite consistent wind called the Meltemi that runs over the region during the summer, and that also coincides with the most recreational yacht traffic. And so what you tend to see is at the end of the summer, the seagrass meadows have been peppered by anchor scars, and so that every season there's an increasing degradation as more and more people are dropping anchors in these habitats, and then the following year the seagrass meadow is in worse and worse state. You can actually monitor that change by flying those drones seasonally over the meadows, because you can actually see from space, or see from, well, you can see from space, but you can also see from the remote sensing of the drone. You can see the almost halos produced around where these anchor scarring or mooring scars might be. So it's another, I guess, opportunity to give you that eye in that sky, that bird's eye perspective of what's happening in terms of the spatial extent of these meadows. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a little quote from me, but for me, the Wingtra has, and will continue to, we've only just recently bought them, but will continue to revolutionise the way that we conduct our work. And the main reason for that is, one, the area and extent that you can cover. Now, on the Wingtra website, you can go and have a look, and it compares a few of the drones. But the fact that you can cover 100 hectares in a flight at a very high resolution is simply a game changer for our work. And then the very fact that you can interchange those payloads. For us, when we were doing our research into drones, we needed something which was a bespoke survey drone. When you buy off the shelf drones, sort of entry level drones, often therefore filming yourself or creating nice images and movies. And whilst that element is an important part of our work, and we do have drones that will allow us to tell a story. You saw some drone imagery in that film. If you want to survey, you need to get the best tool for the job, and for us, that's why we chose the Wingtra. So I'll hand you over to Terence to tell you a little bit more about the product itself. But yeah, game changing.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so as Richard mentioned, we're a VTOL drone producing. That means vertical takeoff and landing drone. We're the world's leading producer of drone. We're based here in Switzerland, and we love hearing about these kinds of projects and supporting that. And excuse me, but essentially what I'd like to focus on too is we mentioned the different kinds of payloads. You can use RGB cameras, you can use multispectral cameras. And since we're talking about the environment, I thought it would make sense to kind of give a little bit more information on what exactly multispectral information is and what it is and where you get it from. So for many years, we've had cameras mounted on satellites, planes, balloons. Richard also mentioned, the satellites such as Landsat and Sentinel. And in most cases, they have passive sensors, and they're devices that detect and respond to some type of input from the physical environment. Multispectral cameras are passive sensors. They have several bands that capture reflected light on different wavelengths. And it specifically is there to be able to capture things that you can't see with the human eye. So it enables an early detection of issues like diseases, water stress, pest infestation, nutrient deficiencies, and more. And while the human eye, can kind of see red, green, blue bands, multispectral sensors, they tend to detect more wavelengths. So for example, with the Ultim, you can have near infrared and red edge filters. These are wavelengths that highlight changes in chlorophyll content in plants. They can also be an indicator of disease or stress in the plants. And so in this graph here, you kind of see the different wavelengths as well too. So next slide, please. Yeah, so what do you get from a multispectral map? So on the top left, you kind of see your standard RGB, the color orthomosaics, provided context for interpretation of, multispectral data. On the right, you see the DSM. That's kind of your traditional data that you're getting from those kinds of cameras. Then, if you can just click again real quick, James. So then we get those up. Yep. So here you actually see multispectral data outputs as well too. So there's indices, which is in kind of a combination of different bands you can create, and each of them you can find different kinds of information. From an RGB camera, you're just seeing kind of this physical representation and 3D model of the world. But with the multispectral, you're getting the NDVI, NDRE, OSVAI. You get chlorophyll, weeds, NIR, CR. I know a lot of acronyms there, but you can learn about these things as well too. And it's really a useful tool in trying to see what you can't see with the naked eye, right? So if we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so I wanted to show some specific case studies as well too. Project Seagrass is amazing what they're doing, and it's such an important use case in the fact that we have lost over 70% of our seagrass around the world. But that's not the only use case too, right? I mean, the environment itself is so important and so diverse. So what I wanted to kind of show is kind of also 3 other use cases in forestry, mine reclamation, and hail damage. And the kind of uses that we're doing around that is, early disease detection, plan and document restoration efforts, and kind of document insurance claims. And then, of course, the most important is research, because we're trying to learn about the environment itself, too. So next slide. So this is a specific case actually in Czech. So it's talking about bark beetles in forestry as well too. So the problem is the bark beetle is one of the most well-known insects causing trees to die. In order to determine infected areas before you can see them, the trees give off kind of stress indicators as well too. You can kind of see on the bottom, you see some trees that are stressed, obviously because they're dying, and you can see that. But with multispectral data, you can actually see them before and try and actually help the trees get better as well too, and pick out hot spots that you're trying to do. So in this case, you use an Ultim camera, the same as Dr. Richard is using as well too, and it helped detect the areas. So determine the areas of problems, calculate the percentage of stress in dead trees, analyze problems, and kind of create preventative strategies. And we were flying at 120 meters. It was around a 5 centimeter per pixel GSD with the multispectral, and it was around 150 hectare flight. So they went out, captured the data, processed it, identified anomalies, and kind of detected canopies with problems, decided which trees needed to be either insecticided or removed, and kind of calculate the costs as well too. Next slide, please. Here's another one too, is mine restoration. In talking about the different kinds of environments that are out there, we're going from sea to land to previously kind of processed land in this sense, in a mine restoration. So most mines at the end of their use, they tend to need to be restored. So this requires a helping hand, kind of speeding up the ecosystem. The forest can serve, as carbon sinks as well too. And what they're really checking for is kind of checking for erosion, controlling the advance of new vegetation, and kind of just getting a better overlook of the plants as well too. So again, in this case, we didn't use an Altum, but we used a red edge. It helped detect erosion as well as the vegetation. So it kind of helped us figure out where we were going to be looking at. So, flying over the large area, getting that accuracy, and just getting it out there. So in this case, we flew at 120 meters, got around 8 centimeters per pixel with a multispectral. They were looking for the NDVI, NDRE, and RGB data. It was around 200 hectares as well too, and kind of the same steps that you would do in most of these flights as well too, by getting the data, processing it, and kind of taking action based off of that as well too. Next slide, please. And it is a hail damage. As global warming keeps happening as well too, weather events become more and more extreme, and we're seeing that across the world, right? And so hail damage is actually a growing cause and problem as well too. So severe hailstorms can produce hailstones that are 2 centimeters in diameter and more, and they can cause devastation to crops, property, forests, and kind of the natural ecosystem that we have out there. So in forests and on trees specifically, hail damage manifests into defoliation and split and broken stems, which makes trees extremely susceptible to pathogenic fungus and bacterial diseases, and not to mention the bark beetle that we saw a little bit earlier as well too. And in this case, they used a red edge, flew it at 120 meters, got 8 centimeters per pixel GSD with the multispectral, and again, kind of the same outputs. But it shows you that this one camera can be used in so many different actual use cases in helping the environment, and from the sea to the coastal kind of ecosystems to further inland as well too. So yeah, and it's very exciting to see that as well. So next slide, please. Yeah.
Well, I think that's been an amazing half an hour there, going through use cases and looking to yourself as well, Terence, about other businesses who are using this kind of in this environmental application. I've learned no end from it. Who would have thought Seagrass and all the additional applications of multispectral cameras in that environment can be so useful and such a powerful tool for measuring things like environmental damage and stuff. There are a couple of questions I saw float up through the whole duration of the webinar. First of all, for you, Richard, I think there's been a couple of people asking about how can they get involved. Can they get involved with the Seagrass project, or is there anything they can do as an individual to help the cause?
Yeah, 100%. So, well, I guess that there's several elements. A lot of the volunteering aspects that we try and facilitate have been restricted because of COVID at the moment. I'll put my my email in there and the website. But yeah, I mean, often we have volunteers come down to the coast and they can help us collect the seeds in the summer. So that tends to be over the last week of July, first 2 weeks of August. So down on those sites. We've also got sometimes we have the option to do the planting side of things as well, and that tends to be October, November time. But again, all on all our social media channels, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. When there are those volunteering opportunities, then we'll definitely put those out there. We've also got another website actually called seagrassspotter.org, and I'll just drop that in the chat as well. This is essentially a smartphone app, so you can download it on your phone. And if you're walking along at low tide, so intertidally, and you saw some seagrass, simply just by taking a photo, the GPS is in the photo, it can be uploaded onto our Google map, and then we've got a record of that habitat being there, which means that we can then go back and if we've got the GPS location, it might be that habitat's a hectare large. I doubt they wouldn't know about it if it's hectare large, but maybe 10 meters squared. We can go back there, map it, and then we can share that information with government and regulators as well. So it's a way of sort of crowdsourcing citizen science, crowdsourcing the location of seagrass meadows, and it's global. We're getting it translated into several different languages with the UN at the moment. So yeah, if you see seagrass, upload it to that, and then obviously we're on a drone webinar today. So for those individuals who are out and you're flying your drone down the coastline, have that data that you're capturing isn't just capturing the sort of mosaic of habitats with potential seagrass involved. You might have oyster reefs, blue mussel beds. So if anyone's sitting on data like that, then please do get in contact, because there are probably researchers out there who want to know about those habitats. And there might be some collaborations that could be taken forward. So again, my email's in the chat there, rj@projectseagrass.org. Please do get in contact.
So basically what you're saying, Richard, there's no excuse for not getting involved?
There's no excuse for not getting involved. None at all.
That's brilliant. I've got a question from Martin Schaefer. He says, do you use the imagery as it is, or do you SFM them? What is the effect of turbidity in the UK waters? How do you assess seagrass at depth? Good
question. So that's actually one of the major challenges. When you're flying these drones in Greece or the Caribbean, then the clarity of the water means that in terms of your understanding the distribution of the habitat, it's fairly clear cut. And so just using a normal RGB camera gives you a fair indication. And also there's I guess it depends at what resolution you require the information. So from a government's perspective, let's say mapping seagrass meadows for Marine Scotland, if at the moment they've only got a GPS location of where seagrass is, knowing that there is roughly 312 meters squared of seagrass is a substantial improvement on what they used to have. So it's about turning point data into polygon data. In terms of then where you can use drones for that, the west coast of Scotland, the southwest coast of the UK, areas where there's high levels of water clarity, it's a lot easier to use drones for that purpose. When turbidity gets involved, then it becomes a little bit more challenging. And certainly there's estuaries around the coast of the UK, the Bristol Channel, some of the estuaries over on the east coast, where the turbidity and the clarity of the water will restrict your ability to map effectively. And that's where you do need to resort in some cases to other options. We're hoping to get a project funded where we can start to work with some of the team that are using aerospace satellite imagery and aggregating basically some of the drone flights that we can conduct to sort of help train their algorithms to better understand global seagrass distribution. So in fact, if I just drop into the chat here a couple of links, there's a team led by Demos who's using Google Earth Engine to try and basically use satellite mapping globally. But I think drones will provide some of the resolution and the what's the word I'm looking for? The ability to train those algorithms to be more effective. I'll just drop those in the chat. I hope that answers your question. It is. Yeah, you can use both RGB and then the red edge, and I've actually popped in the chat as well an example of that from New Zealand.
Brilliant, thanks Richard. Terence, so obviously a lot of people in the UK are flying multi-rotor drones at the moment. If they have that particular project and looking to invest in the Wingtra, is it a big step up from flying Phantoms and multi-rotors up to something like the Wingtra system?
Yeah, great question. And if I could add one thing to Richard's comments earlier too, I have colleagues in South America who've been hearing that I was on this webinar with Seagrass, and they've been sending out messages to their friends and taking pictures of seagrass projects along the Argentinian coast over there. But pretty cool on that. And to get back to the question of the difference between kind of quads and a quads and a fixed wing drone. So it is a big jump. I mean, there's multiple reasons for that. Sure, there's definitely use cases where a quadcopter is useful, but when we're talking about large survey areas and large, coastal regions or even urban or, construction, whatever it is, having a fixed wing is a really big difference. The article that I posted in there, you can see where we actually did comparisons between quadcopters, traditional fixed wings, and then VTOLs. So the combination of vertically taking off and landing helps so much in comparison, because it gets the benefit of a quadcopter, right, that you can take off anywhere, but also the added value of being a fixed wing. So with quadcopters, it's great. You can fly, but you're getting max, I would say, 20, 30 minutes flight time out of it, depending on the payload. And we're talking about maybe the smaller ones. With an M300, you might get a little bit more coverage area as well, too. But with fixed wings, you're getting up to an hour flight time. So around 55 minutes, 50 minutes, depending on the payload. And that makes a huge difference because the fact is with quadcopters as well, too, you can't carry and get that kind of range with the payloads that we're talking about. it's really a massive bump. I mean, what we found is a lot of people traditionally start with quadcopters. They get their initial jobs with them. They start seeing that there's value in that as well too. But then these larger projects come along, and quadcopters simply, unless you had a whole fleet of them, it wouldn't really make sense from an economic standpoint. So a fixed wing kind of combines that, and then having a VTOL fixed wing, I mean, a VTOL drone is even better in that sense. So I would say yes, it's definitely a big jump.
I think that just highlights, Terence, the importance of picking the right tool for the job. It's one of those things where, if we had 200 acres to survey, yes, we could use a small multi-rotor, but is that the most efficient, cost-effective way of doing it? And in a lot of industries where I suppose time is money, Wingtra can plug that gap and facilitate the efficiency side of it. I mean, one example I can use, I had a customer of the Wingtra who, in one single 40-minute flight, captured 200 acres of survey. Again, at about a 1.3 centimeter GSD, which was to do that with a small little Phantom 4 RTK, fantastic little drone, but you're going to be there for days doing that and capturing that sort of data. I've got a question for you, Richard. Why seagrass? How did you get involved in it?
Yeah, good question. I guess I've been working. My background is as a secondary school science teacher, a biology teacher, and biology and sport. And then I went across to work as a diving instructor in Asia, and I was taking guests out and teaching them to scuba dive and showing them the national park where I was working. But it was evident every day. Just some of the illegal activity that was taking place in the park and the degradation of the habitats. You'd end up with fishing nets all over the coral reefs, and I was witnessing slowly just the slow destruction of the marine environment. So I thought I was enjoying being a diving instructor, but I wanted to know more and wanted to see how I could contribute to the movement to sort of restore the planet a little bit. So I went back to do some further study at Coptrz University, got introduced to seagrass meadows. The leading seagrass scientist in the UK is probably Dr. Richard Unsworth, my colleague, the guy from the video. I turned up to be his master's student, started doing my study with him, my academic study, and then realised that there was a bit of an issue because no one had ever heard of seagrass. So it's all well and good doing lots of good science on it, but it's almost a bit more of a marketing issue than a scientific issue. If people don't know about it, why are they going to care about it? So I thought we could maybe utilise some of our skills to convert some of the science that he was doing into something which was a bit more palatable or digestible for the public, so that people could really engage with these ecosystems. And some of that is about making videos, some of that's about making smartphones apps and citizen science, but just finding creative ways for engaging people with why we should care about essentially grass under the water, because they're not quite as instantly captivating as perhaps a coral reef, although maybe I think differently now.
Brilliant, thanks Richard. And something I've been asking all manufacturers on these series of webinars I've been doing over the full 2 days of Coptrz Con. Terence, where do you see the industry heading over the next 2 or 3 years? What changes have you seen in the previous 3, and what role is Wingtra playing?
Okay, sorry for that. So I mean, it's a great question. I think overall the whole industry is moving towards kind of 2 things. I would say the first thing is kind of the ease of use. The easier it gets to use, the better you can get quicker data, easier, and you kind of see manufacturers doing that, right? So manufacturers focusing on educating consumers and customers, and and partners as well too. So I think that's one aspect of it is kind of the ease of use that everybody's focusing on, that user experience. And then secondly, I think it's this interchangeability and multi-use of the drones. So I think quadcopters kind of paved the way to kind of building and introducing everyone to the concept of drones and where they are, and they're still a great use case as well too. And I think now we're moving towards exactly what we have here, right? We have larger drones that are easier to use, that can cover more area, and I think that's kind of where a lot of people focus on. I think there's a lot of focus too on like drone deliveries and so on too. I think that's a couple years out, personally. But I think the surveying and kind of the nature focus of a lot of the drone users that we have out there is they're seeing kind of an immediate ROI. And I think that's really where a lot of people are focusing their efforts on. I know we're doing that as well too. You know, we're always looking for new partners on software, hearing it from customers and seeing the different use cases. I think our actual first use case was, you know, this dugong case out of Macquarie University in Australia, and it's a really cool case. And to think that it's gone from that to some of the world's largest mining companies using it to the HS2 in the UK, or it's really showing you that drones have moved away from being kind of this hobby toy to now really being kind of an enterprise level solution. And I think that's kind of where everybody's focusing their efforts on.
I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, I remember only probably 2 or 3 years ago, to get survey construction business to even look at drones, it was almost kind of like not interest at all. Now I have customers who are using them 2 or 3 times a week and relying on that data as well. It's not that tool as like an add-on now, that they're relying on it. And for me, the data from these drones with photogrammetry more so, is so visually pleasing. And if you can get that into the hands of the end client or colleagues, they can really start seeing the benefits out of it. And I think the drones aren't certainly going to be going anywhere in the next 2 or 3 years. They're only going to get more and more stronger. And just some of the things you've highlighted with the ease of use, that kind of thing is really makes it more and more adoptable for industry to take up. I don't know if any of you guys wanted to add on that at all.
Yeah, 100%. I think the drone technology has just improved markedly in the past 10 years. I think that's what, you know, in terms of the quality of the drones that are now available. But then also alongside that, there's that they're specialising into their niches, aren't they? So, you know, the Wingtra as a survey drone is for me is unparalleled. That if we want to survey, we fly the Wingtra. If we want to create an artistic film and we don't mind potentially crashing it, then we'll use one of the quadcopters. And I think also get that ease of use element. You know, I was really surprised with the Wingtra. It's basically you follow a checklist, then you press play, and you're good to go. And you know, initially you're sitting there going, wow, this is a nice bit of kit. I don't want to crash it on its maiden flight. But once you've flown it a few times, you're like, wow, this is it's automated. You know, it's super user friendly, and I think that element as well is something which has improved markedly. And then the sort of application of drones and, you know, where are drones going in terms of the international work. One of the elements of our streams of work is about capacity building in those 5 countries in the Indo-Pacific I mentioned. And in each of those countries, there is a work stream about building capacity around drone use. So often it will be an entry-level phantom drone or whatever, but the principles of survey using drones are what we're looking to teach, because once you've got that, it adds a whole new capacity, not just for the actual physical mapping, but like you said, the communication. You know, you can get some incredible images, incredible visuals, and when you're looking to change policies in government, sometimes it's the visuals that are actually more important perhaps than the science, or at least they work together. You know, you've got the science to back it up, but what does that mean in practice? Well, it actually means, let's have a look. This is what the seagrass meadow looks like from the air. This is the life that you can see. These are the dugongs. This is what it means to the local community. You know, you can see people walking out into a seagrass meadow, gleaning fish from it. You know, using the area. Then that's an instant connection in a way that perhaps sometimes the numbers and the stats and the maths that we come up with isn't quite the same.
Yeah, and if I can add to that too, I mean, there's it's a great point as well too. I think you know, going forward on, and I think Project Seagrass is the perfect example of this. I mean, there's a need for the next, you know, decade to really kind of map the physical world, and we really need that kind of information. And satellite data is great. It's expensive though, as of right now. It's also sometimes hard to access, and in some places in the world, you know, it doesn't make sense to do it. It's not up to date data. You know, it's very hard to do. And I think drones kind of empower people to make decisions as quickly as possible, as accurately as possible, and they're really headed to the point where it's fully autonomous now, and it's almost like before I probably should never admit this, but as a drone manufacturer, my first time I ever flew a drone, I crashed it into a tree, and I think that was, you know, a hard lesson. And now it's, I mean, we're only talking about like 6-7 years ago, and now where it's at, it's leaps and frogs. And I think in 2-3 years, it's even hard to predict where that'll be at as well too. But I think we're on the right track. I think projects like Project Seagrass are on there. And I mean, it's great to have, you know, partners like Coptrz as well too. I mean, it's just seeing how many people are on here. I mean, that would have been unimaginable a long time ago, talking about actual use cases and so on too.
I think in terms of like also there is a bit of a misconception about fixed wing drones. I mean, certainly in terms of if we get a call and we have, you know, deal with a lot of really great projects at Coptrz, and people come with a specification, and we put forward, oh, have you thought about the Wingtra? And straight away, sometimes you can see people, you know, a bit hesitant. Oh, fixed wing, do I really ought to be flying a fixed wing? There's a bit of this misconceived idea that for some reason they're difficult to fly or that kind of thing. And that's really not the case, is it, Terence? In terms of, certainly from your experience, Richard, you might be able to give from a first-hand point of view the ease of use side of the Wingtra and the flying side.
Yeah, 100%. So, you know, in terms of what the journey we've been through with one coming to Coptrz and speaking to yourself, James, and you know, talking about what we use drones for. Obviously, there's a variety of reasons why we use drones, but from the survey perspective, and then obviously narrowing down the search to, well, you come out with the Wingtra, and then thinking about the different payloads and actually what can we learn about transferring some of the science that we've seen in and around agriculture and looking at health, you know, crop health, etc. Can that be applied to the marine zone, and looking at some of the updated research which is taking place in that environment. In Australia, there's a lot of work already being done on this, because, especially not in my field, because of the Great Barrier Reef and the seagrass ecosystems they have over there, they're probably a little bit further ahead of the curve in terms of the remote sensing that they've been doing. And in fact, to give you an example, they've been flying a helicopter up and down the Great Barrier Reef for years now to take photos out of the copter. But having a drone which can cover not the same distance as a helicopter, but we're certainly moving in that direction. I see that being, you know, something which will almost be replacing that in the future, because it's reducing the cost. But then, yeah, from the ease of use perspective, selecting the Wingtras, heading down we're down in North Wales for the maiden flight, and going through the process with the team, and you know, for a lot of the team who perhaps relatively new to drones, it can be a little bit intimidating. Being, you know, you've seen a Phantom and then you get handed a Wingtra, but just walking through step by step, James having yourself on the phone to answer any questions, and then literally just pressing play, and then it going off, doing its thing, coming back, taking the SD card out, looking at all the images. It's it really is quite simple. So I was nervous at the beginning about this. Oh, it's ready out the box kind of concept, but it is pretty much ready to go out the box. So yeah.
And that's the thing. I think that's testament to Wingtra's hard work and understanding. That's a really key feature for businesses to use. I think sometimes we're at a stage in the industry where it's industries using drones, not drones using industries, if that makes sense, as a tool. You know, a lot of people are using these drones now aren't necessarily from that suppose enthusiastic background, you know, using drones a lot of the time, whereas certainly with businesses now who want to add drones as a tool, they might not necessarily have that knowledge of drones, and having a system like Wingtra, which is really easy and straightforward to use, certainly makes it a great choice of a tool to use. Well, I think that's, unless there's any more questions to the panel, I think we'll wrap up there. Coming up next on the Coptrz Con schedule, it's the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced webinar with George and the guys at GeoAccess, who'll be going through the features of that. I'd really like to take this opportunity just to thank Terence from Wingtra for coming along today and talking to us about some use cases and the Wingtra system itself. And also yourself, Richard, has been a really great customer of ours, and I've really enjoyed the conversations we've had over the few months about the project you're involved in and the system itself. And I know we'll keep in contact going forward. But thanks for joining us, guys. We can't do it without everybody who's joined on, and also the panelists as well. So thanks very much for that. And I'm sure we'll talk to everybody in the not too distant future. So thanks for that.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.